Welcome back to Gravitas. Now, while the debates continue in the United States for special privileges for the transgender community, well, closer to home in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, we take a look at how the South Asian community is dealing with it. The community is still struggling to find basic acceptance, let alone special privileges. Let's now get a perspective from Bangladesh. Our correspondent Saad Hamadi explains.
Officially, there are 10,000 members of the transgender community in Bangladesh, but the community leaders say they represent more than 100,000 people. Bangladesh gave legal recognition to the transgender community in 2013, but they barely have received any support as regards their basic rights and empowerment are concerned. While President Donald Trump has revoked Obama directive on transgender bathrooms, in Bangladesh they still have to fight for social recognition.
বাংলাদেশে তো এখানে জেন্ডার স্বীকৃতি মানে এতটা গোছানো নেই, যেখানে থার্ড জেন্ডার ইস্যুতে ট্রান্সজেন্ডারদের স্বীকৃতি দিয়েছে, বাট এখানে ট্রান্সজেন্ডারদের কিন্তু জেন্ডার আইডেন্টিটি বলা হয়েছে যে তাদেরকে লিঙ্গ প্রতিবন্ধী হিসেবে দেখা হয়।
Without access to education and employment, some of them resort to extortion on the streets. They're known to intimidate people and are therefore considered a social menace. In 2013, Bangladesh recognized the citizenship of transgenders as the third gender, but much needs to be done as regards the social recognition, rights and empowerment in the country. In Dhaka, this is Saad Hamadi for WION.
Well, that was the perspective from Bangladesh, but let's get some perspective on what is going on in Pakistan. Transgenders or hijras have made considerable strides in Pakistan, where the Supreme Court rulings have recognized them as intersex. Yet social prejudices still run deep in Pakistan. Hijras are generally looked down upon, and avenues of employment are limited for them. Let's take a look from Taha Siddiqui, who reports from Islamabad.
Known as hijras, a group including transgender people, cross-dressers and eunuchs, they have a history in South Asia. Another name which the community has taken on for itself in both India and Pakistan is Khwaja Sira. A reference to the community's historical role during the Mughal Empire. Pakistan's transgender population is estimated at about 500,000, many of whom survive as wedding dancers and providers of blessings in exchange for cash, often from motorists stuck at traffic lights. In a highly conservative religious country, they also suffer widespread abuse and discrimination. Many regularly come under serious attacks and have been killed in recent past. Those from the community say that the life of a transgender is quite hard in Pakistan. They're sexually assaulted, financially exploited, and physically abused. Their position has improved in recent years after a series of historic rulings by the Supreme Court, including an order that they should be recognized as intersex on their national identity cards. Previously, hijras had refused to declare themselves as male or female, meaning they were denied an ID card and therefore the right to vote and stand for election. The country's provincial governments were also ordered to create jobs for hijras. Sindh province put a small number to work as municipal debt collectors who sing and dance outside houses of defaulters to embarrass them into paying up. Taha Siddiqui, Islamabad, WION.
Well, that was the perspectives from South Asia, from Bangladesh, as well as from Pakistan. Let's now go to our guest. We have Sid Khani, who is an LGBT activist joining us from Pakistan. Sid, good evening to you. Thanks so much for your thoughts. I mean, we just saw that. We heard about what is happening in South Asia when it comes to the transgender community. How much has it improved and how much left is there to go in terms of reducing the amount of discrimination, whether in the workplace or even in society generally? Give us the take from Pakistan. Sid, I'm not sure if you can hear us. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Sid, go ahead. You're live on television. We're trying to get your perspective. We just saw a report about what is happening in Pakistan versus what is happening in Bangladesh. From a viewpoint about how transgenders are treated in Pakistan, how has it gotten better? Is the discrimination still open? And what really needs to be done? Your thoughts, Sid?
After Supreme Court's ruling in 2012, transgender people they get some rights, but the process of interpreting it was very slow. In Pakistan, progress has never been made that much after 2012, but there are some progress, but they are on individual level. But on the state level, there are not much have been done, and that's it.
I mean, overall, we just saw the report from the United States with what is happening with Donald Trump, the concern for many of those students with which bathroom they should use in schools, a whole issue about should they, as Obama says, use the bathroom of their own choice, or should states have to decide that? And the uproar there is states' rights versus federal rights. Should the federal government make those decisions, or should states and individual schools make those decisions to prevent discrimination, bullying, and harassment? I mean, we saw what's happening across the ocean there, but what happens closer to home? How are transgender students, specifically in schools, what type of problems do they face in Pakistan?
Well, most of the times transgenders can't able to get education actually because of so much discrimination in schools, especially from students, teachers. So it's very important that there has to be some law from the state, from the government, of anti-discrimination and anti-stigma, and especially anti-bullying. And what happened in the United States, it's not about the issues of bathrooms. Here, it's the issue is of their existence, and it's very important to realize in Pakistan especially, because in Pakistan there is so much to do. Only the Supreme Court ruling in 2012 haven't changed anything. Still, they face discrimination. They can't go to school. They can't get a job, a decent job, and so the issues are there.
All right, Sid, we're going to have come back to you in just a second. Let's get some perspective now from India. We have Kalki Subramaniam, who is an LGBT activist who is very vocal about issues with regards to transgender in the Indian community. Kalki, thanks for joining us tonight. Let's get some perspective. We just heard from Sid, who talked about how difficult it is for many students to even get admission into schools. I understand that, that's a little bit different, though, in India, especially in Kerala. Shed some light on how it is progressive in India, at least with regards to students.
I think around the world, whether it is a developed country like the USA or UK or France, or a developing country like India, or Southeast Asia, the issues of transgender community is the same. The problems are the same. The discrimination is the same. The hatred is the same. The violence is the same. The family rejection is the same. So almost like there's no difference between the nations across when it comes to transgender issues. It is really heartbreaking for me today because the Donald Trump administration has actually revoked the previous Obama government's bill, the bathroom bill. It is really heartbreaking. It is not a state issue. It is a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. This will put hundreds and thousands of transgender students into depression. This will really mean that they will be vulnerable to discrimination at school by other students as well as by the school authorities. This means that the protection for the transgender students, especially those teenagers, is revoked. And I know that once this Trump government came into power and the Republicans are actually have been pressurizing him about anti-gay policies, anti-trans policies, and so many thousands of transgender people are in fear, and it is all coming true. And this is this is unexpected from the US. And in that way, I think India is much more progressive when it comes to transgender rights. Even though we started late, I think we are progressing steadily when it comes to the legal rights issues. The Supreme Court has legally recognized in 2015 the Transgender People Supreme Court recognized, and then the transgender policy has been passed in the Rajya Sabha. Various state governments are setting up transgender welfare boards. Even the UGC has issued a transgender administration into universities and colleges. But, family rejection and school bullying is a very common thing. And all governments, whether state or central governments in India, have to work on protecting our children. It doesn't matter your child is a man, a woman, or a transgender. A child is a child. A teenager is a teenager.
Right.
A human life is a human life. It needs to be protected. Policies and policies in the name of politics is inhuman. I mean, these children have to be protected. There's no question about it. It is really heartbreaking to know what has happened in the U.S. under the peer pressure from the Republicans. What Donald Trump did is heartbreaking.
And, you know, Kalki, while we have you as well, I think it's also very interesting. You brought up a very good point about how progressive in certain aspects India is. I understand that you also were able to open up a school. You were instrumental with a school in Kerala, in Cochin, talking specifically, the first one in India, specifically for transgender students, sort of providing that haven, that platform. We just heard from Sid in Islamabad saying for many transgender students in Pakistan, that's not even really an option. So certainly in that way, that is progress, but kind of ironic because given how gay marriage is now legal in the United States, but in India, those in the LGBT community outside of transgenders, lesbians and gays, unfortunately, there is no legal binding for them. So a very you know, sort of a paradox that for transgenders, yes, in certain aspects or schools, but technically under the law, they can't get married. I mean, how interesting is that sort of a paradox, that contradiction?
Well, I think when we talk about the transgender issues, the gender fluidity is something very nature to our culture, right from our ancient times. You can see now in Mahabharata, Ramayana, and in our ancient cultures and scriptures of India, throughout history, transgender people have, their presence is felt. Even in Mahabharata, Arjuna becomes a transgender in the name of Brihanala. So transgender thing is not, I mean, transgender people are not really new to our civil society. They've always existed. And I believe that the Indian contemporary society realizes now and is acknowledging our space in the society. Whereas, unfortunately, the gay and the lesbian issues, their issues are looked upon as moral issues. And whatever it is, the transgender discrimination or the total LGBT community being discriminated around the world, and especially particularly in India, is only because of after the arrival of the British and their imposition of Section 377, their imposition of Criminal Tribes Act 200 years ago, which also criminalized the transgender people as criminal tribes. All this has been brought by the British during their colonial government.
Right. Well, all right. We're going to come back to you, Kalki, in just a minute, but continue the conversation. We have another LGBT activist joining us this evening on Gravitas, Anjali Gopalan. Anjali, thanks so much for your perspectives with regard to this. I mean, we've seen what's happening in the United States. We've seen what is going on with Donald Trump, this latest move. But here in South Asia, you know, as we just heard, is it better? Do we have progress? Or is there still a long road ahead for the transgender community? Your perspectives?
I think it's a mixed bag. And yes, I do agree with Kalki that we have made rapid strides because of the recent judgment the Supreme Court gave us on transgender judgments, on transgender issues. However, we still have Section 377 in place, which completely denies them their right to existence, to have a sexual life, to being acknowledged as a sexual being. So, you know, it's really problematic in many ways. There isn't clarity around the definition of who or how you're going to define a transgender person. So it leaves a lot of loopholes for people not to be able to access what is rightfully theirs or given to them by the court.
Anjali,
So
what
I
about the
think
school though in
it's
Kerala? You know, there's an
improving.
actual school for transgenders. I mean, that is something that
Yeah,
is
but that's
amazing.
one school which Kalki has opened, which is fabulous. It's a great thing she's done. But Kerala is not the whole country.
Right.
You can't have all transgender children going to Kerala to study. And I think it's really critical that we ensure that that transgender children are integrated into the system. It's how many people are going to open transgender schools? When we have a government school system in place, why can't these children benefit from that? So why can't we make sure that these children are not alienated and are not thrown out of school, are not forced out of school? Because I think one thing we have to remember is just because you have a law, it doesn't mean attitudes have changed. That's going to take time. And for us, what is critical is implementing the law in a manner where people will ensure that transgender people are not again having to face the level of discrimination that they've been facing all these years.
All right, let's now go over back to Sid. Sid, you know, we just heard some perspective from India. We heard some how, you know, progressive or how things are when it comes to transgenders with that school in Kerala, one of the first of its kind to allow students who are transgender to have sort of a safe haven. How do we sort of compare and contrast with what is happening in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, and India when it comes to transgender? I mean, can we sort of put them all under one umbrella, or do each of them have their own sort of struggles in their own way? How, you know, your thoughts about that?
Well, if you take whole South Asia, the progress which really, if any country has made any progress, is India, no doubt about it. And as Kelki mentioned, the school which she's talking about, especially for transgenders, it's a great initiative. But what we have to like concentrate on is not to isolate the transgender community from the society. We have to indulge them in the society. We have to put them in the mainstream society. We have to make certain bills. Like in Pakistan, they are working on transgender protection bill. But the real problem comes when we have to implement it. How we gonna implement it? Because there's the state have to be committed about it. They have to take it seriously. Not only in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India, states played a major role for all this like equality, and for transgender people, we must work not on equality but equity, because they have so deprived, they have so like let down. So we have to work. I think in India it's like the progress is great, but in Pakistan it's slow. But they are working. But the main problem is the implementation.
Well, you know, Sid, America still debating on the privileges when it comes to transgenders with the controversy about the bathrooms. But in terms of South Asia, do you feel like there has been some progress, especially with some of the Supreme Court rulings here, or is there still a long way to go? And I'm going to pose that question to Anjali and Kalki as well. But Sid, we'll start with you.
Well, the Supreme Court, like it's a positive thing when we talk about the rulings. But the thing is how the state is interpreted it, how they are like converting it to law, how they are making life easy for the transgender people. Like in Pakistan, there are some individuals like Kami. She is the first transgender model in Pakistan and in the Islamic, all the Islamic countries. But these are the efforts which done individually. People are doing it individually. State is not playing its role. They are not taking these issues seriously. And rulings are positive, but the implementation is the issue.
All right,
Right
same
here.
question now to Anjali. You know, Anjali, let's sort of compare the West with the East. You know, we talked a little bit about, you know, the laws overall, but do these really help, or is it more of a societal understanding?
Listen, I think you can't have one without the other. You need the law as a very strong backup. Communities take time to change attitudes, and what you've been brought up to believe for years and years is not going to go away in the blink of an eyelid. But what's critical is we have a strong law in place, so at least some people can access that law. Otherwise, they're left with nothing, which is exactly what's happening to the rest of the community. If you look at the lesbian and gay community in this country, they have absolutely no rights. They've been denied their very existence. They don't, as far as the courts are concerned, they are a minuscule minority, whatever that means, and therefore they should not have the rights to be the rights that all citizens have in this country. So of course it's a mixed bag, and of course it's a great start, but I really think we have a long way to go, and that we cannot give up the battle and get complacent about this.
All right, Kalki, let me go to you now with regards to this. The Indian Constitution says the right to choose one's identity is an essential part to lead a life with dignity. That all, of course, falls under the ambit of Article 21. Now, do you think this really happens in India? Has the acceptance of transgenders, has that gone bettered? Has it improved, or not really?
I would say it has improved, but it is improving slowly, rather very slowly. I know in 2008 when I went to Kerala, was such a transphobic state. I mean, it's a very religious state and very patriarchal and all that. But still, now when I go to the state, there is so much of acceptance for the transgender people. The state government seems to be setting up a transgender justice board and as well as transgender policy, and has been implementing loans and welfare schemes for transgender people. And even the media has changed so much. I mean, they are very supportive of transgender issues, look at it in a more human and human perspective. So it is not, from state to state, it does differ. But overall, the most important aspect, even though there may be law, even though there may be policy brought in by the government, the most important thing is the social family acceptance. When a family rejects a transgender person, that person actually comes to the street, and the society also exploits them through sexual exploitation, etc. Mostly transgender people, if we today look at transgender people's livelihood, more than 80% of them are begging and doing sex work. And these people are those who have been rejected by their families. If they had been accepted by their families, they would have had the opportunities to continue their education, get well-paid jobs, and stand up and live a dignified life. So our families have rejected them, and that rejection is because of social unacceptance. That has to change. The social perspective on transgender people has to change, and that change can be brought only through law, policy, and the implementation, proper implementation of these things by the government. So it is not a sudden process, it is a slow process, and I am very hopeful that India is changing, and it is changing in favor of transgender community. Yeah, but Section 377, as Anjali Amma said, Section 377 is definitely against the transgender community. It is not only against gay and lesbian community, but it's definitely against transgender community, and it has to be decriminalized.
Kalki, let me stay with you with regards to this. I mean, we saw what is going on in the United States with Donald Trump, with the situation with bathrooms, and that brew continuing, between states' rights and federal rights. Let me sort of bring this back home to South Asia. In terms of bullying, harassment, discrimination, I mean, we always hear about that, but how difficult has it been for members of the transgender community? I mean, can you maybe share with our viewers some stories that you've heard, some of the incidences where not just bullying, but being sort of isolated, specifically for transgenders? How hard has that been? What are some of the stories that you could perhaps share to bring perspective?
Yeah. I'm going to share not only the story that I have heard, I'm going to share my own story. I'm a transgender woman, and when I was, now I'm 44. When I was young, like when I was 13, I was studying in a school. Every day of my life in the school was hell. My fellow students would bully me because I was very feminine. Not only students, but my teachers would also bully me. So I wanted to escape from school, so I used to hide in parks. I used to hide in isolated places. I used to go to even forests. My place is quite very close to forest, so I used to even hide in forests. So it was that pathetic. There was no psychiatrist to help me. There was no school counselors who were well informed about gender identity crisis. My parents were also not informed about this. So I had absolutely no support. And at 14 or 15, I wanted to commit suicide. And I was severely depressed. And that is also one of the reasons why even today the situation for transgender community has not changed in our country, especially when it comes to family acceptance. You see, our education system should have education curriculum on gender and sexuality. Have you ever, I don't know how many people would have studied in school or in college about transgender issues, third gender people. I never studied anything about it, and neither did my teachers study about it, and they were totally, all that they had, as they were all informed, they had myths, they had misconceptions about gender identity, especially about transgender issues, and their ignorance was the main cause of discriminating people like me. And it has not changed over, it's more than 25 years now, and still transgender children, transgender teenagers are bullied at school. And it has not changed. It has not changed in the East. It has not changed in the West. So we need laws to protect gender non-conforming children. It is okay to provide measures, like policies and law for transgender people, but if you don't want transgender people to beg after 10 years, after 20 years, then definitely you need to make sure that gender non-conforming children are protected and are not rejected by our families, our Indian families. That the government has to look at with a very long-term vision,
right,
and has to work on it.
Some very powerful words, a very heart-wrenching story. We really appreciate your time, Kalki. Thank you for sharing your perspective and providing insights with this, as well as all of our guests tonight, Anjali Gopalan, an LGBT activist from Gujarat, as well as Sid Khani, an LGBT activist from Islamabad. We appreciate your thoughts and insights. Stay with us on Gravitas. More news headlines from around the country right after this.